Hello, good morning, and welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. My name is Paul Strangini. Oh, okay. Real busy time for me, but I really wanted to make sure I got at least one weekend study. And this is not exactly a Bible study. This is Had a Household series, which I think months ago I had thought I wanted to title this having something to do with patriarchy, just because I know that is a very upsetting term to many people. They despise patriarchy. They portray it as like, the oppression of women. But instead of what it is, which is the natural order, men need to step up and rule. If we do not, if we leave it to the women, then we have failed in our role. And a lot of people might be offended at that. I don't really care. There are instances in the Bible of women stepping up and ruling, and they are godly women, like Deborah in the book of Judges. But it's an instance where it's like that was because the men had all failed. There are a lot of, men and women have a basically equivalent average intelligences. But there's an interesting fact about it that if you look at the bell curve, of like distribution of the most powerful intellects and the weakest intellects, and then the average, the men will have a much broader curve. Meaning there are a lot more just absolute geniuses on the male side, and also a lot more absolute dunderheads, whereas women just are more a tighter curve. So on average, we're the same. But at the edges of that distribution, there's a big difference. So there's a greater pool of exceptional males. And if we're forced to draw from the females, it means all our exceptional males have failed. And that's a disaster. A disaster. It's one thing when an exceptional female rises to the top. I have nothing to say against that. But when men are constantly failing, our society has entered into a terrible phase. Today's talk is about, do you hate your son? And it has to do with punishment. And so I want to talk about the punishment of children. And there's a scripture that goes along with this. And since I'm not doing a proper study, what is going on? Oh. I need to put on my glasses and figure out the problem here. Okay. Study mode. Window capture. Hate son. Okay. Bada boom, bada bing. There we go. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. It's not a archaic language there, right? Even the idea of sparing. There's a lot I want to say about this verse, and the whole talk's going to be about this verse or similar verses. Because they sound so harsh. There's a principle in the Old Testament: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And it means that the punishment should fit the crime. When you talk about sparing the rod, it does not mean that everything a child does should be punished. Every mistake they make should have some sort of, you should just start striking them. Not everything requires the rod. But I will assert that some punishments, some offenses do require a rod. They do require, I don't use a rod, but a rod, Psalm 23, considered, this beautiful psalm. It says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me by the still waters. He restores my soul. And for his name's sake, he leads me in the paths of righteousness. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. Anyway, I haven't sung it in so long. I'm actually stumbling at it. Well, whatever. I know the part. It says, "You prepare a table before me in the midst of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup." No, that's the end of it. But it says in the, all right, in Psalm 20, since I wasn't able to recite the whole thing, in the midst of Psalm 23, he says, "Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Your rod comforts me." And now I am forced to go to Psalm 23 to figure out where I lost that, the thread of that psalm. Oh, of course. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." The rod is also comforting. That's part of why, if you don't punish the severest crimes with appropriate punishment, let's say that, you're hating your child. It's like I said, I've repeated this example several times, but I see a mother in the store and her child is whining and crying about that they want something, and the mother says no. And then the child whines and cries the more, and the mother gives in. And that is why the child whines and cries, because if it wasn't productive, they wouldn't do it. I mean, if whining and crying got a negative reaction, they would stop whining and crying. That's why none of my children whine and cry, because I can't stomach it. And I don't punish it with a physical punishment. I've never done that for whining and crying. But I always meet it with a lot of negative verbal attention, like stop crying, and then not. And if they whine and cry, even if it was something I was inclined to give them but was reluctant to say no, that just reinforces to me, definitely not now. I don't reward whiners and criers. And when you don't punish something that they do that requires physical punishment, you're encouraging them to do that. And it's like you hate them. And like I said, what about that mom who rewards her daughter for whining and crying? Well, she's not doing what she does out of love. She's doing it because of the child being annoying and importuning them. But in the end, that drives the engine of hatred between a parent and their child. If you let your child get away with bad things, they will become hateful to you, and you will hate them. And what you're really doing is you're short-term pleasing yourself. You're not loving the child. You're just trying to shut them up. There's no love and attention and I have to take responsibility for this person. I have to do something to prevent them from being a dislikable person. Instead, what you're doing is you're pleasing yourself and you're saying well, I just want them to shut up right now. It's a immediate gratification error. So when a punishment is due, it needs to be brought about. And punishment is, 99% of the things I do to punish kids, my kids, I have 8 of them, are not physical. I consider, spankable offenses, let's say, to be the most extreme things I can think of. And, like I said, the rod, the most severe form of punishment for, a child, which is it would be like a switch or the belt or whatever, but it'd be something to make it sting. Like a shepherd and his sheep, he does not have the rod to beat the crap out of the sheep. It is meant to give them a little sting, give them a little crack to cause them a sting of pain so that they would move along, because that's how animals are. Human beings are similar. If you do not direct them in the right way, you might as well hate them, because pretty soon everyone else is going to. You're going to have hated children. I know this because, in a sense, there are many children in this world that I hate. I mean, I don't necessarily hate them in a personal level, but I just, their behavior, I hate it. I just, and I don't want to be around that child. You know, I don't want to be around that child because they are obnoxious, disobedient, disrespectful, and I don't want them anywhere near me. You know what I mean? Like, I do not want them anywhere near me. And I suspect very often that their parents feel exactly the same, but they still say, I love my children. Most of discipline has nothing to do with punishment. But when we're talking about spanking or getting out a switch or a belt or something, you got to be talking about the most severe things. When it says spare the, they say spare the rod, spoil the child. That's not in the scriptures. That's a proverbial saying, at least as far as I know in the English language, but I don't know how far it goes to other languages. But he that spareth the rod hates his son, is what the scriptures say in Proverbs. And there are several others. I'll just read I'll cover the others later. In fact, I so much want to just talk about it that I want to just hide this for now. Let's just go to full screen mode. Ba-da-boom. Okay, there we go. Now we can just talk. I gotta order contacts because I don't mind appearing in glasses, but the reflections on my eyes, on the glasses, it makes it hard to see. Whatever, hard to see. Period. So, spankable offenses, things you're willing to actually strike your children for, should be the things that you most that are most grievous, that are most like, that is so taboo. I need to give you a little sting of pain to stop you from doing it. Because if I don't, later in life, there will be much greater pains. You will experience many greater pains for me not having stopped you. That is the application of pain. And some people think it should never be applied, and I say you hate your child. Because there are some things that you cannot just reason, especially the littlest. Like I said before, if you properly discipline a young child with little slaps, I mean stuff that would, that barely stings, but that is so shocking to them that it wakes them up to like the undesirability of their behavior. And my short list is things like, with the little guys, it's no biting, because children always start by biting, and it's like that is a very possibly damaging thing they can do to someone. And they know, and when a child bites another person, they can instantly see the pain they cause and the physical harm they do, the impression of the teeth and all that. And so biting or other mostly biting, actually. I was going to put a video up as part of even this study, but it's still on my camera, of how really permissive I am. Like my young ones, my 3 and my 7-year-old, I let them climb up on the couch, on the arm of the couch, and they jump off, and I got these like gymnastic mats I keep in the house, because I let them be rambunctious. I let them put on boxing gloves and punch each other, or no boxing gloves, and they punch and kick each other. All my children are trained in wrestling and that kind of combat sports, martial arts, that kind of thing. I'm very much in favor of that. Especially for boys, it is essential that they learn how to engage physically, because for males, that's a very important thing, is to be able to understand your capabilities, to know how to control it, and to to be adept in the physical things, because between male and male there's always a threat of violence. It's always like an underpinning thing between two males. Not that we, I've never I don't want to say never, wait a second, let me think. Well, I mean, when I was in 4th grade, I was pinned down, and they were threatening to tie me up with jump rope and throw me in the creek. And so I kicked my way out. and I walked away and I got punched in the nose. That's why my nose is crooked, because it was broken when I was in the 4th grade. At least that's what I think causes to happen. That's where it's broken. So boom, over like that from behind. So I mean, you know, I've used violence like that. I'm trying to think of some time. Yeah, I had other incidences in my young adult life where I was possibly unjustly violent, but you know, but not really. I mean, I'm not a fighter, not a striker, though I know how to fight, and I'm willing to fight. And I know within me is a monster that can be violent. And if you don't understand that about yourself, you risk not being able to control yourself when you're angry. And that's a very important point, because I always look at punishment of a child as being, especially corporal punishment, especially some sort of something that's going to hurt a little bit. And it should just hurt a little bit. It shouldn't be like you're causing damage. You know, like I said about the shepherd with the sheep. Do you think he's trying to damage the sheep with his rod? No, he's trying to protect them. He's trying to guide them. The point of physical punishment is guidance. It is not meant to be physically damaging. God forbid. You don't want to physically damage your children with bruising or anything like that. It should just sting a little. It's a little sting. And that is not abuse. It says he that spares, you know, some people get this idea. I remember seeing like some sort of, I don't know if it was 20 years ago or 60 Minutes, this is years ago, talking about spanking, and there was a family they showed it, and they were slapping their kid for everything. Like they spilled their milk, slap, this, slap. Like I said before, I hardly ever have used corporal punishment. Only for, and I'll talk more about the reasons, you know, like I said, biting and stuff, but also lying. But you got to catch them really lying. If you make a mistake on that, it can be bad, very bad. You don't want them to be mistaken. So to avoid that, I really, at times, I haven't like laid a trap exactly, but I've looked for opportunities to find them out in a clear lie. And especially not a lie like, some people get so weird with their kids, like making up a story, or they're living in because children have trouble distinguishing fantasy from reality. And if they're talking in terms of fantasy, you don't want to punish that childishness. You know, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child, but that's not the kind of foolishness that needs to be punished. But you don't want your child to grow up to be a liar. So in some critical issue that's important, if you can catch them in a lie and punish them for it, you're doing them a huge favor. Because being truthful is very important in life. All the times where I wasn't truthful in life, it did not serve me well. And I had been, you know, but there, a lot of times, you know, untruth is used to cover up other faults. Once we start covering our faults, you know, the untruthfulness is symptomatic of something else going on. But if you know, bring your child to live in the light, you know, and to get them to be truthful about themselves, it will help them, moderate their behavior and not need to lie. You know, someone who's walking in the light and doing, you know, someone who's already believing they need to tell the truth is less likely to do things that encourage them to lie over, meaning to lay a lie over. The actual punishment, like the actual act of punishing a child, is certainly, you know, I might say angry words, but you never do angry spanking. Should not be done. If you're angry about something a child has done, by no means ever punish them in that state, physically. I don't think you should start, you know, wailing on your child when you're angry. It's not, I don't think that's beneficial. I've even regretted angry words, but not particularly, not a lot, to tell you the truth. But when it's spanking, it's gotta be. I always have done it very calmly. It's like a judicial procedure. You know, that's how I treat it like that. Like it's almost ceremonial, almost ritualistic, as far as like I very quietly sit down and I just kind of calmly, pull the little guy's pants down over his butt and give him a smack. And it's not. We're not talking. Like I said, the rod is symbolic. As they get older, I would never give a spanking to a 10-year-old, like a little smack with the hand. It just seems weird. It seems more appropriate to just give them the rod, a little, even though I've never used like a switch like that. I think I remember James Dobson talking about that. He thought you should never use your hand because it's sort of confusing. But I for the littlest guys, I like the hand because I like to be able to control. I've heard someone suggest flicking. I don't like that either because that just seems much harder. Like if I flick the child, I don't agree with that. Like I just don't think that's good. A little stinging. I found that even a little spanking, like literally that probably doesn't even really hurt, works. You know what I mean? It shouldn't really hurt. They're little children. It should just be kind of shocking. Like I'm gonna give you a pat on your bottom. And the calm sort of like in a way, like I think it's sort of like I said, it's like it does certainly for the little guys doesn't hurt them. For the older kids, if they're 8, 9, or 10, or 6 or 7 maybe, and you have to do something that does indeed sting, like I said, that's another matter. Because at 7 or 8, it does indeed need to sting. But it should not be harm. Like it says in the Proverbs here. Let's bring the scripture up here. In Proverbs 22, I think it is. I got it up there. 22:15. Foolish. I already mentioned that one. How about this one? Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, that he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. But the word beat there, we think of beat as being delivering a beating, to beat them. But you also beat a drum. You know what I'm saying? Don't take our English connotation literally with the idea of beating your child. Don't beat your child in the way we use that word. Do not. The word means to strike or smite. It should not be anything close to something. When it says he shall not die, it doesn't mean like beat him. He won't die. Just beat him. He'll just be in the hospital for a few weeks. Don't do that. All right? That's not what it means. It means to deliver a stinging blow. As far as if you're going to take it literally, it means give them something that causes a little pain. They may act like it's a big deal, but it should not actually be a big deal. Like meaning, I've certainly experienced very painful. I broke my foot once, my 5th metatarsal on my foot, the outer one, and from what I understand, that's an extremely painful bone to break, relative to other breaks you might experience. And I would agree that it was the most painful thing that ever happened in my life was breaking that little bone. And spanking is so far from that, and so far from so many things. I mean, I remember when I got a shot as a kid, I thought that hurt worse than anything my dad ever did. And I think I was physically punished just a few times as a young man. Not a young man. As a child. As a young man. Sometimes you ridiculously refer to your child as, see here, young man, but you're not a young man, you're just a little boy. Teenagers could be considered young men or young women. You should never strike a teenager, ever. It's too late. If they're doing things that need striking, you have to find other methods of punishing them. Striking them now will only cause resentment. That's the thing too, is like, if you have not incorporated corporal punishment, physical punishment, into your child rearing from the bottom up, meaning from the youth, don't start it later. You have to find other ways. Don't start spanking them for the first time when they're 8. They're going to be like, what's this? Don't try to insert it. If you have done it, if you haven't done it, find a different rod. You know what I mean? Because like I said, rod is a metaphor for stinging punishment. There are other ways to make things sting. Take away their video games. Like, take the console away. Put it in the trunk of your car. I don't care. Get it out. You know what I mean? Take away this, that, the other. They won't die. Though they cry and scream, take away their tablet. Take away their smartphone. Don't pay their cell phone bill. You know, a cell phone, even one that doesn't have service, will make a 911 call. I believe that's how it works now. I mean, so they can still be used to do things like that. Or get them a flip phone, like the one I use. They cost like no money. I know smartphones now are even, they've gotten extremely cheap. But they aren't as fun, flip phones. They can't go on social media, or it's very difficult. I don't even, you know. I think I tried to use the internet on my cell phone, and it's a complete disaster. It's my flip phone. It's, forget it. You know. And so they will forget it also. You can find other ways of punishing them. And that's the important thing. If you don't want to hit your children, do not spare the idea of the stinging punishment. Some things need to sting because some things ought not be done. You can't, your child lies. If they steal, obviously, like an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old that steals, they need a stinging punishment. That goes down a dark road. Their lives can be destroyed by thievery. You get a thieving child. I don't mean stealing food out of the fridge. Gosh, or something, you know, don't misconstrue stealing to be something else. You know, it's funny because I want to talk about this, but I think of all the weird examples I've seen of parents punishing their children, and it's a total farce. I said, I let my kids climb up on the couch and jump off. For some people, like climbing on the couch, oh, spanking time. That's ridiculous. You know, rambunctious behavior for children is all right. That's not the kind of foolishness you need to punish. You need to punish the foolishness that says, like, oh, I can just take this and no one will notice. Oh, I can just recreate reality by just saying a lie. I can just reconstruct reality with lies. And like I said, don't punish fantasy. You know, like I'm a kangaroo. You're lying. Smack. Don't punish their little fantasy child's world. What you do is you punish a material lie in a critical matter. And like I said, I pretty much look at a certain age, like around 5, I'm looking for those because you got to catch them early. You know what I mean? If you catch them early, when they start that process of like machination in their mind where they start trying to alter things and it comes down to some critical matter. Now, in their fantasies, I don't punish but I will talk to them about the difference between fantasy and reality and the importance of truthfulness. And I will warn them, you know, if in a matter that's, you know, in important things, do not lie. And also in little things. Okay, what I'm saying is I don't punish little fantasies. That doesn't mean I don't punish things that might be considered little lies. Because, you know, what a small thing the tongue is, and how great a fire it can kindle. A little flame a little spark can ignite a large conflagration. So little lies are not no big deal. What I mean is, like, don't confuse childish fantasy with lying. And, you know, I'm only saying that because of extreme cases I've seen. Like, you're lying. You're not a kangaroo, or why am I saying kangaroo? You know, but like a child is having some sort of fantasy. It's like, look, I'm a kangaroo. You know, that's not a lie. Something entirely different. So, you know, understand the idea. A lie in terms of a deception. Children are going to be wrong You know what I mean? About a lot of things. It's not necessary to punish them with a stinging punishment in all those cases. Stinging punishments, you know, mean something that stings, something that hurts, but never that causes injury. Ever should you injure your child. They're going to do a good enough job on their own doing that. Because I've never injured my child. I mean, you know, that's critical. You don't injure them. You don't cause them some sort of lasting pain. God forbid. It should be just something that stings for a moment. And they may cry like they're going to die, but they won't die. Implicit in that scripture is the idea that the punishment is not that severe. The point is you are guiding them and showing them the right way of behavior by saying this. When you move into this area, you're breaking normal social conventions or things. You know, these are unacceptable things, and you come to a place that's highly unusual, where I'm going to cause you pain. It's like, why would my parent cause me pain? Because you've come into something. You've crossed a boundary into something completely unacceptable. And somebody says, well, why would you then do something to them that is also, you know, sort of unacceptable, meaning you're crossing a boundary, right? Whereas normally you nurture and love your children. It is precisely because of that, because you show them that they have crossed a boundary, not, you know, and to forbear to do that is asserted in the scriptures that is hating your child. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're more, ultimately when a parent refuses to engage in some sort of stinging punishment. Because I can hurt it, like, let me put it this way. I remember in Little League, there was a kid who, like, he couldn't play because his grades were too low. And I was just like, I'm not like that. I'm like, no, I want you to play sports. I don't think it's like this extra thing. It's like, to me, it's like there's math and then there's sport. It's just as important to engage in that physical. We don't want a bunch of marshmallows, you know, children. They need to be involved in physical activity. And I'm not going to punish them by taking it away. Because like I said in another study, if you punish them by it's like you can't give that back. You can't give that game back. You know, I remember I had a friend who missed years of football because of his grade problems. And that was absolutely, I just thought it was terrible. I was like, you're not playing? They wanted his grades up, so they took away football. I don't agree with that. There are other ways you can there are other ways you can make it sting. You know? Well, and again, for him, it was much too late to start spanking him. He was like 12 or 13. There are many ways to get at a 13-year-old or 14-year-old. There's many stinging punishments. Sorry. Oh. I wouldn't bother. You know, the Lord doesn't rain. You know, He doesn't rain blows out of heaven against us. Even and His staff and rod. His rod comforts us. Your rod and your staff comfort me. The staff is of gentle guidance. The rod is of a stinging punishment. Both the stinging punishment and the gentle movement in the right direction are comforting. That's how a child will feel when they're properly disciplined. Let me get back to where I was. I'm sorry. You know, I was actually up till 3 last night working on a work project. I'm only here because of dedication that I want to do something on the weekend. And I certainly will be there Monday. So it gets difficult. Let me just really quick. Let's check the pop-up real fast. I call the pop-up, I mean the chat. Because there could be clarifying questions being asked. There are no clarifying questions being asked. That means everything I said is perfectly clear. All right, good. That's not, I'm just kidding about that. That's not true, of course. So there's lots of ways to get at them. Oh, taking away things that are precious that you can't restore. Not a good idea. You can cause resentment. The punishment of the rod, it's supposed to be a very brief thing. A brief sting. Bang. Oh, all done. I don't like start wailing on them. Like I said, when it says beat, it means, and look it up in the Hebrew, it does not mean to beat, like to continually hammer someone. It doesn't mean that at all. It means just to strike them. There's the word smite. You smite him, they will not die. And so, there's a tendency, I think, on some people's part to interpret these scriptures in the harshest possible way, instead of looking at them as being a bit of a hyperbole, stating it at the maximum. Like if you find your child abusing animals, I mean, it's like there could be some reason there to give them a nice stinging punishment. Say that's not something we do. Like torturing animals. You want your child to grow up to be the next serial. Though I engaged in animal torture. That's probably a terrible thing to admit. Not really torture. I didn't mean it. As torture. I wasn't like the thing is feeling pain. But when I was like 5, I remember throwing tadpoles against rocks with a cousin, and I remember him saying that he just felt awful later on. He had dreams of tadpoles coming after him, and I grew out of it. And some people grow into it. Like I didn't do the next year. I was like sort of like, we better let the tadpole go. And just the other day, I caught a rat in my house and I drove it to a remote location and let it go. A rat. I gladly poisoned the rats. But it's like when I had one in my power, it's like I don't feel like killing it. I have the opportunity to show mercy. After being a sinner so many years, you sort of begin to love mercy. But I also love my children, so it's not a question of mercy. The mercy sometimes is being, punishing them for something that's unacceptable. Like I said, but those punishable offenses should be very few. You don't want to have like this long list of like, if you don't brush your teeth, you get spanked. If you leave the toilet seat up, you get spanked. If you pee on the toilet seat, you get a spanking. If you leave your toys out, you're gonna your child's gonna hate you. The rod of that kind of the stinging punishment is only for things that truly need it. And if you engage in, like I said, I feel like physical punishment begins with just things like control. I didn't say it this time. I talked about it last time. Like for me, it starts with the babies when they're young. I didn't realize you needed to brush their teeth from the very beginning. Well, at least our kids did, because apparently they would get cavities, weak enamel and stuff. So their teeth need to be brushed. It's important that they brush their teeth, unless you want to have children with rotten teeth, or unless you're willing to never give them anything that causes tooth decay. Just feed them raw meat all the time. Beautiful teeth. Give them bones to chew on, so I hold them, and so I take one arm here and I hold them I kind of put them under my arm and I kind of cradle them in a certain way so that I have control of them, and I give my finger in the side of their mouth and I hold it open and I brush it, and they hate it. They scream and yell for a while. But then they just get sort of like used to it, to the point where they bring you the toothbrush and they get annoyed if you don't brush their teeth, because they're like, and I remember it was like an epiphany to me. I'm like, now they're like, they like, well, you put me through this. And like I said, I didn't start off like with the theory when I was 21 that I was going to use this. But after our third child, we discovered, the weak enamel can be, there can be problems, and he had rotten teeth in his front teeth. I discovered that at the third child. The first one didn't. The first two didn't have a problem with that, so I don't know what it was. Maybe he had a sweet tooth or was sneaking it, but he had his teeth rotted, and so it became necessary from then on to make sure they got their teeth brushed, and physically restraining them as to do something that was unpleasant was like that's almost like torture. You know what I mean? It might be viewed by them as torture because they don't want it. You know, in today's culture where they're like trying to tell you to ask your children permission before you change their diaper, it probably seems like a horrible thing to do, but they needed their teeth brushed. It's like, I remember hearing the story of the guy who, he developed some sort of treatment for cancer, for leukemia and for things like that for children. And one of the ways he discovered certain things, he caused them a lot of pain, trying to do them good. But they were dying, and the point was to save their lives. And you don't want to cause pain, and we empathize deeply with those suffering pain if we have empathy. But sometimes pain is necessary. You know, like we give our children shots. We allow them to be shot up with, you know, vaccines. And God, I'm sure I'm going to offend people by mentioning that. I know I have family members that are very much against it. I'm not. I mean, I don't vaccinate them for everything. I always think some things it's like, you know, they don't need a vaccine against, what was it, some sexually transmitted disease, because I'm not going to raise sexually promiscuous children. Well, you don't know. It's like, no, I do know. I have experience. I know how to raise children to adulthood being pure sexually, and also knowing the value of it, and therefore not putting themselves at risk. So you don't know how. Yeah, I do, because I'm around my children. I'm actively involved in raising them. I don't turn them over to the state. And I'm sorry if that offends people who send their kids to public school, but that's what you're doing. And the state in this day and age can't be trusted. They will teach your children, and they will put your children in an environment that is full of sexual promiscuity. They will teach them, you know, the sexual education is going to be corrupted. It is not a good place. And years ago, it wasn't as bad, but it was still bad. It's like we only discovered this idea of schooling children a couple hundred years ago. We've never stopped to question, like, is this a good idea? I don't mean it's a good idea to educate your children. Like I said, what I do at home, I don't even like to. I remember when I started homeschooling, I didn't even want to call it. I didn't want to give my kids like grade levels, like first grade, second grade, third grade, until I got into wrestling, where it was like I kind of had to declare a grade based on their age. So I did, and I kind of monitor that, but it's almost entirely for sports. In homeschooling, I just consider it home education. I'm not doing school at home. I'm doing education in a different way. I don't want to get sidetracked on that. What else do I have to say about punishment? Like I said, I don't script these things. I just think about them, what I want to say. It is important to deliver stinging punishments. It is important that those be rare and for the worst offenses. And I haven't talked a lot about which, you know, like I said, I don't let them harm, let's say it that way. Hurt each other is fine. Children are going to play roughly, and they might hurt one another. And like I said, my instinct, I don't necessarily give spankings for this, but I have. But I say that the crying child, when there's two children in conflict, the one who's crying is the one who most likely needs the spanking. That may sound harsh, but it's like, I don't hate my children. I don't want them to be whiny, cry people. So I do not reward that behavior. My inclination is to punish it. Of course, the first inclination is just to speak some harsh words like, stop crying. And giving crying no sympathy when it is not the result of harm. When a child has been harmed, when another child does injury to them, or does something that could potentially injure them, or, you know what I mean? Like when they cross the line, and that child is crying because of harm done to them, then the other one may be in need of a punishment, and possibly a spanking or something like that. if it doesn't involve harm, it's just if it's just like he won't do what I want to do and blah, I refuse to be manipulated by that. And I'm trying to think of like the times when I found that two children in conflict, one crying, and they got a spanking. I'm trying to think of a precise example, and it's not coming to mind, so I apologize for that. It's like in future, episodes, I may remember an exact episode of that where that applies. But today I'm not remembering it off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and belabor that point. But yeah, but the crying, but it's not necessarily deserves a spanking. It's just a rule of thumb that says when they're in conflict and one cries, it doesn't mean you go and spank the crying child. But what I'm saying is they're the one that deserves the negative attention. They're the one that you need. They're the problem. That's the presumption. I presume until I find out, like, oh, you harmed your sibling. Until I find out that the other child harmed them. But it's like most often you will find it's not the case. Like and it's usually the older one. And I pay a lot of deference to my older kids. Like in whatever the situation is, the older one is going to get the more benefit of the doubt because I've disciplined them, and I also like to show them the flip side of that is to show them deference and trust, so that they can feel like it's all been for something, and they see that they gain respect over. Because most often in conflicts, the older is right. That's what I've found. They can be unreasonable. I've found instances where it wasn't so. But I do give them the presumption. I give them the benefit of the doubt. Not necessarily the presumption of innocence, but I give them the benefit of doubt. Meaning if there's a doubt, they get the benefit of it. And when in doubt, don't spank at all. That's another thing. It's like don't spank when you doubt what the truth may be. If you have any doubt about the truth, don't punish anyone. Sometimes, when I've used sort of exotic punishments, let's say, and I mean corporal punishments, when my kids were kind of getting towards the old side. I won't say exactly which ones, but one was almost a teenager, or he was a teenager, a young, like 13, something like that. And he often came into conflict with the child who was like 2 under that one, and they were in anger, they're kids, and they starts like throttling him, like putting his hands around his neck, and that's not acceptable. But at the time, I felt like he was too old for spanking, and I didn't know what else I could do to really make an impression, but in the process of understanding what had gone on, he throttled the one. His brother, in between brother, had just observed this all, had watched it, and I listened to it, and he had just watched. And I'd always given my older one deference, but then at that point I said, "You watched him do that. You need to stop him. There's some things that you need to step up and say no." And so I punished the middle child. He was the one. He was still young enough to spank, and I gave him a spanking in front of his brothers with the belt. And ever since then, they've all managed to sort out all their differences. There's no fighting in my house. That was the last fight I had among that group of children ever. It was the end. I mean, because it might have seemed cruel, and some people would probably disagree, but at the time it seemed like the wise decision to me. It made an impression on everyone. The conflicts ought to be resolved not through violence, though I used violence, but I wasn't angry when I did it. Obviously, this child had done nothing except not intervene. I say, if something like that happens, your brother starts strangling, you know, I don't know how serious the strangling was, but he had his hands on his neck. You know, I understand. I want to wring. I remember wanting to wring my brother's neck, and probably coming pretty close to doing it. I don't remember. You know, you jump in and stop, and there was never any real danger. You know, obviously this is childish behavior, but it displays impulses that need to be curtailed, and that killed it. Killed it. It's absolutely gone. I don't have fighting in the house. None. It creates a culture of looking out for each other. They all intercede on the other's behalf. But it's rare you get that opportunity to instill that in your children. And but it must be instilled. You know, it must be instilled. They need to look out. They don't just need to fear you. They need to fear each other. And the judgment that each other might bring. You know, they need to respect each other. When I say fear and respect, are the same thing. Because, like I said, it's like if you see a live electrical wire, the difference between fear and respect is basically zero. If you're on a high cliff looking down, the difference between fear and respect is basically zero. Respect is just more about how you treat something, but you treat it in exactly the same way you would as if you feared it. You know, and when it comes to a family member, you know, respect can mean that you fear the relationship being destroyed, or you fear a bad outcome in some other way. So I don't know if it was such a good idea to do this talk today. I am absolutely not at my best. But I think we'll close it out there. Let's see, that scripture. I want to just peek at that scripture again. You shall deliver his soul from hell. And again, hell here is Sheol. It means the grave. I forgot. I don't know. You guys can't see that yet. Okay. And and when it says hell, the grave, it means by that's a metaphorical representation of death, meaning bad things will happen to them if you do not give them the stinging punishments that will deliver them from the consequences of lying, cheating, stealing, being violent, you know, acting out in anger. Like I said, because as far as I'm concerned, spanking should never be done in anger. It is almost a ritual. It should be done with an absolutely placid demeanor. It has the most impact that way too, because if they just think you're hitting them because you're angry, that, you know what I mean? Like, you cannot allow your child to think you're hitting them just because you're angry, because then they'll think it's okay when you're angry to just hit somebody. But when you calmly take them and say, now you have to have a spanking, and you say, you can say, you know, whatever you want to say, you can say, I'm very sorry. You know, that you need this. You know, it should be done calmly, so that they understand that you're not doing it because you're angry, because they get angry and they feel like hitting people. That's how children, they get angry and they want to hit, and you can't do that. Never strike your child in anger, ever. Ever. Corporal punishment is to be used judiciously and sparingly. Even though it says, he that spares, the word spare means to not do. The difference between sparing and do something sparingly is different. You know, I did not contradict the scriptures when I say do it sparingly. You never spare it in an incident when it is required. You never spare the rod when the rod is required. But the transgressions which warrant corporal punishment are few. You don't want to punish them for every little thing. Just like a guy doesn't go out there and every time the sheep eats a stray blade of grass, he's just beating him with the rod. That's not what it means. I said, interpreting things in the worst possible way is no way to approach this. I mean, like, in the most severest way. We got to beat him with the rods. So bam, we beat him till the point where he's almost dead, because it says he won't die. So as long as he doesn't die, it's okay. No, wrong. What was the last scripture? The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother shame. Children not disciplined bring shame. You will be ashamed of your children. You will hate your children if you do not give them the proper punishment in due course when it's necessary. And for the severest things that people do, the most taboo things, the things that you do not want them to engage in at all, there can be a possibility of spanking. If you discipline your children early and make them learn to mind you, meaning to do as you say, starting early, by never rewarding bad behavior. That's a very important thing. If they cry, they don't get anything. Don't reward bad. I mean, little babies, when they cry, yes, you you pick them up and stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about infants. God forbid. You never punish an infant. There's no point. They won't understand. Punishments only go to children who can actually kind of understand. Like when they're like 2. And it begins around 2. But the toothbrushing can go to infancy once they start teething. And it's not a punishment. It's just getting them used to your authority and to submitting to your physical attempts to guide them. So it's a way to not be punishing, but to just get them acclimated to being under authority. That's what the toothbrushing thing is about. It's not about a punishment. It's a way you can punish a child who it's not appropriate to punish. Don't punish the tiny little ones. Don't do it ever. There's no reason. If they can't understand it, there's no reason to punish them. Don't do it. Okay, let me just make that clear. Because God knows, someone's going to start spanking their infant. It's like there's no point. It doesn't have any effect. It's just it'll make it ineffectual later. It should be shocking when you give them a little slap on their bottom. They should be like, oh, what? And they should cry, and because it's so shocking that they've never had anything but love and kisses from the parent. And then suddenly to have this smack on the butt from them doing something, they'll be like, what did I do? And it should be clear and obvious that they know what they've done. They've got to be 2 or older before you do anything like that. Though, like I said, there are other minor ways of showing disapproval. They say 2 or older. I don't know if that's a hard and fast rule. But whatever, they have to know. It should be some. Let's say if they're 1 and they're doing some, there are other ways of. Like I said, there's not a one size fits all. To me, it's like there's like a ramping up of according to what is going to have no effect on them, other than mentally to guide them. The purpose of the punishment is not to harm, but to guide. And that's very important. It's a big difference. We don't want to cause any harm to our children. If you're harming your children, you're doing the wrong thing. And the point of the scriptures is that actually by not punishing them, you can do them harm. So it is a complicated thing. It is something that you can't, as far as I'm concerned, there's no, it's situational. There's no exact science to it, though. Maybe there's an exact science. I'm not a scientist, in case you haven't noticed. So if there's exact science to the parent, to parenting, I don't know it. Well, that's my advice in terms of punishing your children. Be sparing, even though it says he that spares the rod hates the son. Don't spare it when it's necessary, but definitely spare it when it's not an appropriate punishment. You gotta figure out what that is. So I don't want kids jumping on my couch. Okay, but that's probably not a spankable. It shouldn't be spankable. Well, they're disobeying me. I don't know. I like to give my, I go down the Salvation Army, and you can find, I was commenting to a friend who visited not too long ago. I'm like, I mean, you come here every couple of years, and it's probably funny for you because we have different furniture every time, because we replace our furniture every couple of years. Because I got a lot of kids, and the little ones are simply destructive. So I don't buy expensive furniture. I have a few expensive items. Like I had one child. We had this nice, I think it's called an armoire or something. It's like a big TV stand, basically, with doors, and someone gave it to us, and the child carved in it. I was very angry, but I didn't punish them. I didn't spank them, because you know why I didn't punish them? Because I never told them you weren't supposed to do that. You know? Don't carve in our wood. But I hadn't exactly told them you're not allowed to do that. So how could I punish them? That's an important point. I'm sad I left it to the end. Hope you endured all my humming and hawing. If you know what I mean? Like, if you haven't told them it's wrong, don't punish them. Like, out of nowhere. Unless it's the behavior you immediately want to correct. But he was too old for that. He was too old to just, like, run up and spank him out of it. Because I was too angry about it. I was really angry that he carved it. And I forgot how I dealt with that. But I don't think I dealt with it properly, because then the same child ended up carving our new piano. Not carving big time or anything, but like there was damage done to it. Intentionally. And I just gave him a severe tongue lashing, basically. And they grew out of it. And it's like, and that's the price I pay for having children. It's like, I don't think that's important enough. You know what I mean? I mean, it's important to take care of your things. But the thing is, I'd already established enough love and respect in the home that I didn't have to strike them for that. You know, carving up some physical object. It wasn't like he destroyed it, but it would have been, I would have been wanting to give them the belt over something like that. But it's mostly, I'm angry. What have they done? I don't remember if I made it clear at that point after the first time. And so I'm not going to punish them for my shortcomings. You know, like, I've failed as a father to outline certain behaviors to say, like, hey, we care about our things. And I let you jump on the couches, but there's a line. It's like, it's hard to show where that line is. I hadn't defined it clearly enough. So, you know, it wasn't appropriate to spank, so I didn't. You gotta show, you know, I would rather mistakenly punish a child, which is a mistake I made years ago. I thought, I was sure they were lying. I was sure they were concealing something from me. So I spanked them, only to later discover that they had not been concealing something from me. And I thought that's one I always consider a mistake to this very day, and I apologize to them. And whatever damage done would be done to our relationship, because the spanking didn't kill him. It didn't hurt him. It didn't harm them, I should say. It does hurt. Of course it hurts. Emotionally and physically it hurts. But they did understand that I thought that lying and deception was important enough that I punished them for it. And I admitted I was wrong, but they still understood that the punishment was just for the crime that I thought was committed. And that's important. The child should believe that what they did is worthy of the punishment you give them. You know. And they should understand, like, I have good rapport with all my older children, and that's the report I get back from them, that they generally felt that they were never done any injustice. And even the one that I did injustice to, I bet he would say there wasn't an injustice, but maybe he would. I don't know. I haven't asked. That one's still kind of young. So, anyways, that's my short on the idea of punishment. Do not hate your son. Do you hate your son? Then don't punish him. Don't discipline him. This has been focused primarily on physical discipline. There's many aspects to discipline. This is not the end of the idea of discipline. I'll talk more in the future about I want to tackle that sort of the ultimate first, but there are many grades of discipline, like how you get the child to behave, how you get them to be enjoyable. Like, I like my kids. I like all of them. I mean, I like being around them. They are pleasant. Other people like my kids. It's because I like them because they behave in a way that's likable. But if you allow your children to get away with behaviors that are unlikable or antisocial or, just unacceptable, criminal, lying, cheating, stealing, if you let them get away with that, not only do you hate them, but everyone around them is going to hate them. You're going to burden them horribly in life. People will give them, they'll be going around adults and they're obnoxious and they're unlikable, and the adults will smile because it's a child, but down deep they're going to be false with them. They're not going to be real with them. They're not going to like them. I know, because that's how I feel. Like, I just smile. It's like, it's not my kid. I can't do nothing about it. But I sure as heck do not want to have anything to do with this kid. Facebook notifications. Totally useless. Okay. So, don't hate your kids. Don't hate your sons. Do what you need to do to help them on their way, to make their lives, to help them get the right start in life, with discipline, with the right behavior. You'll save them from death, from an early grave, because that is often what happens. Once you start down the path of unrighteousness, of egregious unrighteousness. We're all unrighteous. None of us is righteous. No, not one. But we all understand. I don't want to have a holier than thou attitude, but there are people who commit. I don't want to judiciously in the sight of God exalt myself like I'm not as sinful as other people. But we all know that some degrees of sinfulness are so sinful that, society, that we lock people away. We can't have people doing these things. They can be forgiven, but they have to, you have to punish them in some way. And unfortunately, or at least remove them from society, because they weren't, as children, raised up and made to behave. Because there are some people with the same lack of impulse control, with the same sociopathic tendencies, with the same psychopathic tendencies, who nevertheless, if properly raised and disciplined and not allowed to become narcissistic and self-centered, if they'd been raised properly, I gotta believe that it would have helped them engage with society in a way that was healthy and not destructive to them and to the people around them. So it's very important. You hate your child because you will send them forth. If you don't give them a little pain now, they could be in store. They have a lifetime of pain ahead of them. Life is pain. Life is pain. There's pain in life. There's pain. You get married, it's pain. You have children, pain. They will bring you to pain. So you engage. It's like inoculation. They give you a little bit of the virus, a weakened version of the virus, to make you immune to the virus. And you give a child against, like, the thieving virus, you give them a little pain, a little bit of it when they're a child and they do something, thievery or lying. When it's small, you nip it in the bud. You kill it while it's weak. While the impulse is not strong, you go after it and you sting it and you take it away. And then the issues they will have will be very basic. Like the things I've struggled with in my life have not been, like I said, I had stole like twice or whatever, not twice, but I got caught once, and then only once afterwards did I do it again in a very impulsive moment. I remember lots of times, and this is not meant to signal virtue, but it's like, this is the effect it has on you. It's like, I've walked out of the store without paying for an item, like in my cart. Like, I realized they didn't scan this. You know what I mean? Like I put it, or I left it in the cart and I walked through and I just got to the car and realized this didn't go on the belt. And I walked back in the store and paid for it. As much as sometimes I resent the huge corporations that I'm buying stuff from, or banks or whatever, it's like I still feel like my conscience, it's like I have God over me, and I'm like, well, they won't know. I know they'll never know, but I'll know. The Lord knows. So I go back and I pay for it. You know, instead of worrying about a lot of other things, you worry about very small matters of the heart. And you don't want to have gross, meaning large, sinful issues to deal with as an adult. Give your children the right start in life. Don't saddle them with that burden of not having, because eventually it will sting you. Get your inoculation, get your immunization, get the shot early. No one thinks anything twice about giving a baby. We give the kids, the little babies, to get their shots, and you know what? The shots hurt. So many. I think it's funny that they say, "Oh, you never give a child a spanking, whatever," and they'll give their infants needles. Well, it's for their good. The needle's for their good. Yeah, and so is a little bit of the rod. You know what I mean? It's not going to kill them. No, it's going to bring them life. It brings life. So anyways, I'll see you guys. I won't see anything. I don't see anything. All I see is my computer screen. But you will see me tomorrow. We'll get back to Matthew. Hopefully I can get some sleep tonight. Anyways, thanks for joining me in this study. I hope this wasn't too insanely stupid. I think there was actually some wisdom there, but I don't feel very wise. I don't feel very full of... I feel kind of, like I said, I scheduled this an hour later for the weekend, so it was like, I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep, so... Fortunately, I slept in on Saturday, though, so I had a little extra gas in the tank, so I don't think this was complete awfulness. I'm not going to delete it. At some point in the middle, I was like, I think I should delete this one. But I haven't said anything I think is worth deleting. So, thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to studying with you again tomorrow. This has not really been a Bible study, though. Okay, but that's my line. I decided a long time ago that's the line. Thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. All right, I'm getting goofy. Let's go. I'm just looking for my folder that has the songs in it. Let's play a song and say goodbye. Goodbye.
And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and on the Sarah